I knew something was rotten the second Mason Halford waltzed into the conference room, like he was auditioning for a reality show called Nepo Baby Takeover. Hair slicked back with a vengeance, sunglasses still on indoors, and that cocky little up nod he gave the CEO, like they were frat bros at a tailgate, instead of sitting down to finalize a $300 million health data expansion deal that took 3 years of my life to prepare. 3 years of strategic frameworks, cross-border compliance, EU and APAC health privacy vetting, back-channel legal approvals, and enough paperwork to make a forest cry. And this kid, he walks in 5 minutes late holding a coffee the size of a fire extinguisher, plops into my usual seat, and says, "Let's make history." I looked at him, then looked around the room, waiting for anyone to tell me this was a joke. But nope. CEO just gave a tired half smile. VP Halford beamed like his kid had just solved world hunger with a Canva deck. And the head of international partnerships from the client side? She blinked like she was waiting for subtitles. I nodded, said nothing. Because that's what women like me are trained to do when corporate clownery shows up in a Hugo Boss suit. We internalize, we smile, and we silently make a note to document everything at the top of the to-do list. But I'll tell you this, my ears were ringing with fury while Mason babbled about synergizing dynamic ecosystems. My binder was color-coded, indexed, and triple audited. His had one printed slide, upside down, with a post-it note that just said "sell them hard." Real quick, before we go any further, I know 90% of you are listening without subscribing. Look, if you've ever had a boss's failson hijack your job in front of your face and call it innovation, go ahead and hit that like button. Maybe even subscribe. It's free, and it keeps our team caffeinated enough to tell you how it really went down behind the glass doors. Back to the meeting. The client team was clearly confused. Dr. Ramirez, their global data lead, kept looking at me every time Mason mentioned compliance acceleration modules, which, spoiler alert, not a thing. And then Mason capped it all off by turning to me and saying, "Victoria, could you just take notes and flag anything that's like legally weird?" Legally weird. That's what he called 3 years of pre-negotiated GDPR amendments, 500,000 in external counsel hours, and a 14-country stakeholder review. Legally weird. I kept my expression neutral. My jaw wanted to leap across the table, but my face stayed HR compliant. Then, he dropped the line, "You're not as important as me." He said it with a laugh like it was a joke between teammates, but the air changed. Subtle, like someone just opened a window during a blizzard. Even the CEO shifted in his seat, but no one said anything. Not one person stepped in. Halford Sr. just smiled into his coffee. And Mason, he went right back to explaining user data flow like plumbing. After the meeting, I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a full 10 minutes. Not crying, not even angry, just calculating, because this wasn't new. I'd seen this playbook before. Women like Mason fail upwards, women like me get buried under their mess and then blamed for the collapse. But this time, I wasn't going to be collateral damage. I opened my laptop right there in the parking lot, logged into our old archive system, back when we used secure docs before the acquisition. I typed in a keyword I hadn't touched in 7 years, compliance reassignment, cross-border, and there it was, a memo, dated during the company's chaotic restructuring in 2016, signed by a long-gone COO who once told me, "You're the only one here who actually reads the fine print." That night, I poured a glass of wine, kicked off my heels, and started printing. Not just the memo, everything. If Mason wanted to play corporate king of the hill, he better pray I didn't still have the map to the landmine field. If you've never been professionally gutted by a man who thinks Excel is a lifestyle brand, let me walk you through it. Day 2 of negotiations. We're in the 14th floor conference room. Glass walls, Scandinavian chairs, complimentary sparkling water, like we're all too hydrated to betray each other. I'd already prepped a briefing doc so clean you could eat off it. 36 pages, every clause indexed, every privacy concern flagged in highlighter yellow. We were about to go over the regulatory matrix for international data transit, and I had spent weeks syncing those approvals with our EMEA legal team. Weeks. Mason rolls in 10 minutes late again. This time, no coffee, just AirPods in, lasting some pump-up playlist I'm sure was titled Grind Set Vol. 3. He drops his backpack on the table like a teenager arriving at study hall, leans back, and says, "All right, team, what's the vibe?" The vibe? The vibe, Mason, is that you're about to torpedo a 9-figure deal because you can't tell the difference between consent-based processing and a Subway sandwich order. I start walking through the flagged sections on client-side disclosures. Standard stuff, anonymization protocol timelines, backup retention duration, breach escalation paths, etc. Nothing controversial but critical to close. I'm halfway through the explanation when Mason literally waves his hand in the air like I'm an annoying housefly. Yeah, Victoria, we get it," he says. "But we don't need to bore the clients with admin stuff, right? Admin stuff." That's what he called the only thing standing between us and an international lawsuit. He keeps talking. Let's focus on the strategic alignment opportunities and circle back to the, what did you call it? Compliance notes later. Circle back. That corporate snake-eat-snake phrase that really means toss it in the shredder and hope no one sues. I open my mouth to push back, but he keeps going. Honestly, Mason laughs. Victoria's just here to keep the paper trail neat. Don't worry, we've got real approvals already in motion. He winks at the client. Winks. Like we're in a Gotham sitcom. Then he says it. You're not as important as me. I wish I were exaggerating. But the room went dead silent. Even the lead negotiator from the client side, a woman named Elaine with 30 years of experience and a scar on her face she once told me she got from falling off a horse and finishing the race, blinked like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Mason turns back to the screen and clicks ahead to the next slide. Something with a waterfall chart and a lot of corporate glitter that means nothing and solves less. I looked across the table. The CEO was watching me, not Mason me, his face blank, not surprised, just resigned, like this was a storm he'd seen brewing and decided to let hit. I didn't say a word, not yet. I just picked up my pen and wrote one thing in the margin of my notepad: keep receipts. That's the thing people like Mason don't understand. Can walk into a room full of experts and mock the details, but eventually those details will trip the wire around your ankle. And me? I was done warning people where the tripwire was. After the meeting, Mason slapped my shoulder like we were buddies. Don't worry, Vicky. You're killing it with the whole lawyer vibes thing. Keep the nerd stuff flowing. I smiled, sweet, quiet, the way HR prefers. Then I turned, went straight to my office, shut the door, and called Laura Katz, my former counterpart from legal who now works at a boutique firm in DC. The same woman who once told me, if you ever need a knife sharpened, call me before you use it. Hey, I said when she picked up. You remember that 2016 compliance reassignment memo? Laura didn't even hesitate. Yours was the only name on it, wasn't it? Still is, I said. And I need help proving it without tipping off the circus. Send me what you've got, she replied. Let's start digging. So I did. While Mason was busy planning his next buzzword buffet, I was busy pulling old contracts, matching clause numbers, reviewing board minutes buried behind 3 server migrations. Because if he wanted to make it a game of who's more important, fine. But I wrote the damn rulebook. That night, after tossing my blazer over the kitchen chair and microwaving the same damn leftover pad thai for the 3rd night in a row, I didn't even bother pouring wine. My hands were too twitchy. My brain was already in excavation mode. I sat down with my laptop, clicked open the VPN, and dove straight into the archives. Corporate has this belief that once a project is closed, it's forgotten, buried under PowerPoint decks and archived Slack channels. But I remember everything. I remember the stench of that 2016 restructure like it was yesterday, how half the compliance team got absorbed into ops, how leadership reshuffled us like mismatched IKEA furniture, and how I was the only one who insisted we document everything. Back then they called me paranoid. But paranoia, it turns out, is just risk management with better intuition. I opened the legacy email database, a bloated nightmare of PSD files no one's touched in years. I had to boot up an old Windows VM just to access them. It felt like cracking open a time capsule sealed in passive-aggressive memos and reply-all disasters. I searched for primary authority reassignment, got nothing. I narrowed to compliance signatory restructuring, still nothing useful. Then I tried something stupidly simple. I typed my own name, boom, 57 results. I filtered to the year 2016, 6 hits. The 4th one made me sit straight up. Subject, final signatory mapping Q3 adjustments from Q. James L. Barnes, retired now, lives in Vermont, used to hum while firing people, to GC Office, HR Compliance, and me. Attached, a 1-page PDF titled Cross-Border Compliance Signatory Chart. Finalized, I opened it. My name was listed next to every cross-border regulatory category involving PHI protected health information. Europe, Asia Pacific, Latin America. The chart had color-coded sections, and mine were all green. Primary, no alternates, no backups, just me. Underneath, in that lovely legalese font they used back then, Cambria 11 PT Italic, it read, per Board Resolution 46B, Victoria Tran is the sole designated authority for final compliance approval on all cross-border data engagements involving PHI, effective immediately. This designation shall persist until formal reassignment by board motion. And guess what never happened? A reassignment. I cross-referenced every board minute from 2017 to now. Not once did they revisit that clause. No vote, no override, nothing. Everyone just assumed new hires and new titles meant new authority. But legally, nothing changed. Mason could stomp around all he wanted, but without my sign-off. This deal was a beautifully polished turd with no legal legs. I laughed. Not loud, just this sharp, breathless little sound that sounded like someone cracking their knuckles at a funeral. Then I started pulling more threads. Laura texted me, "You find anything?" I sent her the PDF, the email, and a timestamped screenshot of the server path. Her reply, "Victoria, this isn't leverage. This is a goddamn trapdoor." Exactly. And now I was standing over it, watching Mason dance on the hatch. I kept going. Next, I dug into HR logs. I wanted to see if they ever formally acknowledged my designation during onboarding for new execs like Mason. Of course, they didn't. HR's idea of protocol is a PowerPoint about harassment that everyone clicks through like it's Minesweeper. I found a welcome packet for Mason, standard fluff, culture, mission, inclusion. Nothing on governance, nothing on operational authority. That meant Mason didn't even know he needed my approval. No one told him, because no one remembered, except me, and maybe the CEO. Because let's be clear, he had that look. That I remember that memo, but I'm pretending I don't look when Mason mocked me in front of the client. That's the corporate version of pleading the fifth. You just sit there and let the idiot son hang himself with his own PowerPoint animations. It was midnight when I finally stood up from the table, back aching, laptop humming like it was about to take flight. I'd started with rage, but what I had now was clarity. Focus, a scalpel disguised as a PDF. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to do what it always does when you shine enough light on it, burn, so I printed 2 copies of the memo, one for my lawyer, one for my folder. Then I went to bed, slept like a damn baby. The next morning, I canceled my 9 a.m. check-in with business ops, skipped the ethics seminar HR had been spamming us about for weeks, and made one quiet call. Laura Katz picked up before the second ring. "Please tell me you've got something fun for me," she said, voice still half asleep. "You remember that 2016 email from Barnes? With the compliance signatory chart?" A pause, then "Victoria, you sitting on a live wire?" "No, I'm sitting on the master breaker." By noon, she and I were screen sharing from our encrypted workspace, combing through every dusty clause, board minute, and internal appendix like we were prepping for a war crimes tribunal. Laura had access to some very old InterSys filings, stuff that never made it into the new SharePoint migration, because, in her words, the interns who ran that project didn't know emotion from a muffin. We pulled up the original board resolution 46B from Q3 2016. Sure enough, it was airtight. The line that mattered was buried in Section 5, Item 3. Until such time as an updated resolution is formally adopted and entered into company record, the exclusive authority for final cross-border compliance certification shall rest with the designated compliance officer as listed in Appendix A. Appendix A, Victoria Tran. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat ticking like a metronome on the edge of explosion. Laura just stared at the screen, then reached off camera. I heard the distinct sound of a wine bottle being uncorked. "You know what this is, right?" she said, pouring something into what I sincerely hoped was a coffee mug. "It's a mistake that never got fixed." "No, it's a damn kill switch," she replied, "and you're the only one holding the key. We found no amendments, no overrides, no transfers of authority." In the years since, the company had changed hands twice, merged compliance with legal, spun off internal audit to a separate group, and no one noticed this clause still sat in the basement like an unexploded bomb. We checked deal files next. Specifically the $300M health data expansion. Mason, of course, had been pushing drafts directly to client-side counsel without routing through governance. Every one of them was missing the final compliance endorsement section, or had it signed off by legal with pending compliance cert in fine print. He probably didn't even notice. I did. Laura confirmed what I already suspected. Without my approval, the deal was legally non-compliant in every jurisdiction where personal health data crossed borders, especially Europe, which meant the client's board would never finalize until the right box was checked. "My box. You realize what you have here?" Laura said. "I realize I'm about to cause a very expensive panic attack." She smirked. "No, you're about to become the last adult in a room full of toddlers with matchsticks." And still, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, just aware. Like when you finally spot the cracked pipe under the sink after months of water damage. You're relieved to know what's wrong, but now you've got a mess to contain and a landlord pretending it's not their problem. I spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a summary document. 1 page, simple language, just the key clause, the resolution number, a reference to the original filing, and my name, bolded. No commentary, no threat, just truth. Then I did something I'd never done before. I printed it on official letterhead using the physical printer in legal's back office, the one they keep for special filings. I signed the bottom with my compliance cert ID and date stamped it in ink. No PDF, no email trail, just paper, something you could hold in your hand when the walls start shaking. I slid it into a folder and wrote in clean black Sharpie across the front, "Client copy." Then I locked it in my drawer. I didn't know exactly when I'd use it, but I knew this much: when I did, it wouldn't just be to stop a deal. It would be to dismantle a lie. And when that moment came, I wanted to be ready. Not for revenge, for precision. By week 3, Mason had somehow convinced himself he was single-handedly carrying the $300M deal on his back. He strutted into meetings like he'd just won a startup pitch on Shark Tank, flinging buzzwords like confetti, except none of them landed where they should. Scalability, vertical integration, quantum onboarding. He said that last one while pointing at a chart he clearly didn't make, trying to explain cross-jurisdictional risk exposure with all the finesse of a drunk raccoon trying to do calculus. But here's the part that really boiled my blood: he wasn't just loud. He was dangerous. Mason started forwarding partial drafts of our agreement to external vendors, without NDAs, without internal review, without my sign-off. One of those vendors, cloud firm in Singapore we specifically flagged for data residency issues, called me directly asking for clarification. Clarification, on a clause that hadn't even been reviewed by legal yet. I nearly swallowed my tongue. I confronted Mason in the hallway after a meeting, quietly, professionally. I said, these drafts need to go through governance. That's protocol. He smiled like I'd just asked him for a sandwich. Relax, Victoria. We're in the build momentum phase. Sometimes you gotta grease the wheels a little. Greasing wheels with unauthorized documents is how wheels fall off, I said. He chuckled, slapped my arm. You worry too much, that's why you're in compliance. That night, he posted a selfie on LinkedIn with the client's project manager at some rooftop cocktail event. Caption, building bridges, locking in deals, #NextGen leadership. I sent the screenshot to Laura. She replied with a single skull emoji. Meanwhile, VP Halford was busy playing defense like it was father-son flag football. Every time someone questioned Mason's authority or tactics, Halford swooped in with a nauseating mix of managerial tone and paternal pride. Let's give Mason some space to execute his vision. Victoria, maybe step back a bit and let the new guard take the lead. When I reminded him, politely, that compliance oversight wasn't optional, he hit me with the classic, let's not get bogged down in bureaucratic semantics. Then came the HR stunt. A calendar invite popped up one morning, role scope clarification. I knew that language. That's HR code for we're going to ice you out until you quit or scream. Sure enough, the meeting was 3 people and a PDF filled with corporate nothing. Concerns were raised, role overlap, team cohesion. I sat through it like it was a funeral, smiling, nodding, taking notes I'd never read again. They tried to paint it like I was being rigid and resistant to change, that I wasn't adapting to evolving leadership structures. Translation, I wasn't kissing the right ass. I walked out without saying a word and went straight to the 10th floor where the CEO was reviewing quarterly reports in his office. I didn't ask to come in, just passed by. He looked up. Our eyes met. And that's when I saw it, that flicker. He knew, not just about the clause, no, deeper than that. He knew the house was on fire, and he was letting it burn just long enough to see who ran out with gasoline and who came back with a hose. Because despite all the chaos, all the PR glitter Mason kept throwing in every direction, the CEO hadn't intervened once. Not when I was cut off in meetings. Not when VP Halford pushed me into HR purgatory. Not even when the Singapore vendor debacle almost breached our data policy. He was watching, letting the idiots dig, and me? I was the quiet woman holding the shovel map. I sharpened the blade. I refined the memo. I checked every line of the summary document one more time, then folded it into my leather portfolio, next to a hard copy of our last EMEA audit and a sticky note that just read, "They forgot who writes the fine print." The next negotiation was days away. The stage was almost set, and the trapdoor was still waiting. There's a kind of calm that comes after the rage burns clean through you, not peace exactly, but the surgical focus of someone who's sharpened every edge of their restraint into a blade. That's where I was, not angry, not even insulted anymore, just precise, like a sniper locking in the coordinates. One shot, one page, one clause. Night before the final negotiation, I stayed late in the office, hours after everyone else had left for the night, after Mason skipped out early again to go work remotely from some whiskey bar that had an old typewriter for decoration and charged $38 for an old-fashioned. The place was probably called something like Reform and Mash. Fitting, since that's exactly what his leadership style was doing to our credibility, reforming nothing and mashing everything else. I'd already gone over the original board resolution with Laura 5 more times, line by line, like we were lawyers prepping for deposition. We couldn't find a single thing that invalidated it. No override, no amendment, no updated delegation. Nothing. The clause was still active, still binding, and still had my name on it. So I did what Mason never would have thought to do. I followed the rules. Perfectly, down to the letter. I pulled the official Intersys Dynamics compliance letterhead template, the one that hadn't been used in 5 years because most people didn't even know it existed, and formatted a one-page compliance summary. Subject, Cross-Border PHI Regulatory Compliance Certification Designated Authority Confirmation Body. A short paragraph. Plain language, no flair, just the facts. Per Resolution 46B, adopted and entered into record on August 4, 2016, and in absence of subsequent override or reassignment, final cross-border compliance certification for engagements involving protected health information, FI, rests solely with the undersigned. This designation remains active, binding, and legally required for any deal involving international PHI data transfer, including but not limited to expansion initiatives within EU, LATAM, and APAC jurisdictions. I typed my name. Then, beneath it, I signed in black ink my full signature, the way I learned from my father who told me if you sign your name, mean it. Below that, I stamped my unique compliance certification ID, the only one in the company still valid for those jurisdictions, because no one had ever updated it. They'd all assumed the system was smarter than the people who programmed it. After that, I printed exactly one copy, not digital, not emailed, just paper, tangible, unalterable. I slipped it into a high-gauge cream folder with a single label in all caps, client copy. Then I locked it in the bottom drawer of my desk, next to a flash drive with the original PDF, a printed copy of the 2016 board minutes, and a backup USB drive that Laura made me prep just in case the server mysteriously goes down before the meeting. It sounds paranoid. But then again, they tried to fire me with a PowerPoint about role evolution. I don't trust anyone whose entire HR strategy fits on one slide with a stock photo of a sunrise. As I packed my bag and looked around the empty office, I realized something strange. I felt good, not cocky, not righteous, just ready. I was holding the one thing they'd all forgotten mattered, actual authority. Mason thought this deal would be his coronation. He never once checked who controlled the crown. Tomorrow I wouldn't yell, wouldn't accuse, wouldn't even interrupt. I would simply hand over one page and watch the silence do the rest. The room was already warm when I walked in, too many bodies, too much nervous energy, and the heavy scent of whatever cologne Mason had drowned himself in that morning. Something expensive and aggressive, like a boardroom trying to cover up a dead body. The conference table was packed. Client-side team across from us, 11 of them, stiff in their charcoal suits and high-stakes politeness. Mason had insisted on printed name placards with the Intersys logo in gold foil. I think he thought it made us look more legitimate. It made us look like we were cosplaying as a Fortune 100 company. I took my seat without a word, folder in front of me, pen perfectly parallel to the notepad, coffee black and cooling. My hands were steady. I breathing calm, and Mason, he was pacing at the front like a game show host who hadn't read the questions. Good morning, everyone, he beamed. Today's the day we lock this in. We're in the final lap, the finish line's in sight, and I just want to say it's been a pleasure collaborating with such visionary partners. I counted 3 cliches in under 10 seconds, a new record. He launched into the deck. It had motion graphics, not joking. Slide transitions that looked like PowerPoint had been left alone with a bottle of vodka and a dream. He started throwing around phrases like regulatory synergy and multi-jurisdictional elasticity, which don't mean anything but sound like they should. I watched the clients' faces go from polite engagement to strategic blinking. One of them, a woman named Marisol from the EU compliance team, kept flipping through the packet like she was trying to find where the real information had gone. Another, older man with rimless glasses and a jaw that didn't move unless it had to, leaned forward and asked Mason, "Can you clarify the scope of data control within a pack under this structure?" Mason grinned and said, "Absolutely. That's fully aligned and accounted for. No red flags there whatsoever." He didn't even glance at me. And that was the tell. Because if you're talking cross-border PHI and you don't look at the compliance lead, you either don't know the rules or you're bluffing. Mason was doing both. By slide 8, the room was visibly fidgeting. The lead client, Elaine from Global Risk, shifted in her chair and leaned slightly toward me. "Victoria," she whispered, "are these approvals final?" I met her eyes. Calm, controlled, not yet. She froze for a second, just long enough. Then nodded, subtle. But I saw the message in her face. "Thank you." Mason kept going. Buzzwords and bullet points flying past like confetti in a wind tunnel. When he reached the final slide, labeled Green Light and Execution Path, he turned to the room like a magician revealing an empty hat. "So if everyone's aligned, I suggest we move forward and start drafting the signature matrix for closing." "Sound good?" He looked at the CEO. At Halford. At the clients. Not at me. Not once. Elaine glanced around the room. No one moved. No one reached for pen, so I did. I reached into my leather folder and pulled out a single cream-colored sheet. No theatrics, no speech. I laid it flat on the table, slid it gently across to the CEO. He looked down at it, read the top line, didn't say a word, then he turned it and slid it across to Halford. The VP's face drained in real time. His hand twitched. He picked up the page, scanning faster and faster, his mouth moving like he was trying to catch up to what his eyes were reading. Mason finally noticed. "What is it?" No one answered. The room went quiet. You could hear the projector humming. You could hear my pen click closed. Halford opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out, just air, like his lungs knew what to say but the words didn't dare show up. The CEO finally looked up, not at Mason, at me, and that flicker in his eye, the same one I'd seen weeks ago, was back. But this time, it looked a whole lot like respect. And Mason, he just stood there, still smiling, still waiting, still utterly clueless that the floor had already dropped out beneath him. Mason clapped his hands once like a coach wrapping up a pep talk before sending the team out to lose a game they never trained for. "All right, folks," he said, beaming like a man who'd just sold a yacht he didn't own. "Let's wrap this up. Victoria, if you can just stay out of the way, we'll be out of here by lunch." He said it so casually, like I was the intern who'd forgotten the muffins, not the woman whose name was hardwired into the company's compliance framework like steel rebar in a foundation. The clients didn't smile. They didn't even blink. You could feel the air thinning. Elaine folded her arms. The EU rep closed his folder with a soft, deliberate snap. I didn't respond, didn't flinch. I just reached once more into my leather folio and took out the original. The paper, the real one, not a memo, not a talking point. not a PowerPoint slide with a chart pretending to be law, just one page, signed, certified, stamped. I handed it to the CEO, not with flourish, not with venom, just purpose. He took it silently, glancing at the header. His face didn't move, didn't twitch, but he read it all the way through, top to bottom, slowly. And he turned and slid it across the table to VP Halford. No words, just paper, just truth. Halford looked down, clearly confused at first. Then his eyes hit the clause, Resolution 46B, and something inside him broke. His face went ghost white. I watched his hand begin to tremble as he gripped the bottom corner, like holding it tighter could somehow stop what was coming. He opened his mouth once, closed it, swallowed, tried again. His lips moved. But there were no sounds, just shallow breaths and a tiny whistle in his nose that told me panic was setting in. Mason stepped closer, peering over his father's shoulder. "What's that?" Halford didn't answer. Couldn't. Mason leaned in further. "Is this something I should see?" He picked up the paper himself, read the first paragraph, and I saw it, that exact moment. The instant his reality cracked. You ever see someone's ego physically deflate? It's subtle. A shift in posture. A twitch in the jaw, the slackening of a grin. His smile froze, then curdled. His brows dipped like he wanted to understand it, needed to, but couldn't, not fast enough. What is this?" he asked. The CEO finally spoke, not loud, not emotional, just the authority to certify this deal. Mason blinked. "Okay, but I've already sent the signatures," Elaine interrupted. "Which, if this document is accurate, aren't valid." Her voice wasn't cruel, it was clinical, like a surgeon marking where the cut would go. The Singapore vendor rep stood up slightly, as if preparing to leave. "Mason," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time all morning, "you didn't have the authority." He opened his mouth, but I kept going. "You never had it, you never even checked." I turned to the client team. This clause was implemented in 2016 during a restructure. It was never overwritten, amended, or reassigned. Legal has confirmed it remains binding under current governance. Any previous approvals lacking my signature are non-compliant. Silence, complete, total. The kind that only comes when power shifts so dramatically, everyone in the room has to recalibrate their understanding of reality. The CEO leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. He didn't look at Halford. Didn't need to. And Mason? He stepped back, just once, like the floor had tilted. He tried to say something, anything. But all that came out was a soft, bewildered laugh, half a chuckle, half a wheeze, as if he still couldn't quite grasp that this wasn't just a momentary blip. It was over. The illusion, the performance, the charade, and me, I sat perfectly still. No gloating, no vengeance speech. Just a woman in a gray suit who had done her job exactly right, and waited for the world to notice. After the paper hit the table, there wasn't a raised voice. No slam of fists, no corporate fireworks. Just a heavy, surgical quiet, like the moment after a bone breaks but before the pain hits. The client team huddled quickly. There were murmurs, short nods. And then Elaine stood and asked, without looking at anyone but me, "Victoria, can we speak with you privately? Not intersis, not legal, not compliance. Just me." I stood, collected my folder, and followed them into the smaller glass-walled room just off the main conference suite. No one else was invited. Not Mason, not Halford, not the CEO. As the door clicked shut, I felt the final seal break between what had been and what was about to begin. Inside, it was simple. They asked two questions. One, can this deal still be saved? I said yes, if it goes through the proper channels. I'll walk you through every correction required. Do you feel safe continuing under current leadership? I paused, then said, "That's not my call, but you've seen who holds the pen." They nodded. That was all they needed. 15 minutes later, I walked out. Mason was gone. Literally. His laptop was still there, screen locked. But his chair was empty, and his water bottle had been quietly removed. Halford was on the phone in the hallway, red in the face, pacing in tight little circles like a man negotiating a sentence instead of a contract. He didn't make eye contact. Elaine left with her team without shaking hands, but before she stepped into the elevator, she turned back and gave me a slow nod. The kind you remember. That night, I went home, poured a glass of something strong, and sat on the balcony with my phone on silent. No social media, no email, just the sound of wind and the clean, satisfying silence of a day done right. By morning, the emails began. First from HR, leadership restructuring underway. Second, please do not grant system access to Mason Halford until further notice. Third, VP Halford has begun an indefinite leave of absence. Fourth, from legal, please prepare a compliance training brief for new deal review protocols. The CEO will join. And finally, mid-afternoon, a meeting invite titled only, Quick Sync Office of the CEO. I walked in at 3:05 sharp. He was alone, no assistant, just the two of us in the low hum of the AC. He didn't waste time. That clause, he said, folding his hands over his desk. "How long did you know?" I met his gaze. "Long enough," I replied. He nodded slowly. No anger, no disbelief. Just that quiet resignation of someone who's watched a chess game unfold and finally realized who the real player was. "You saved this company a very public embarrassment," he said. I didn't respond, because I wasn't here for gratitude. I wasn't here for promotion or a pat on the back. I was here to do my job, and I had done it. Perfectly. As I turned to leave, he said one more thing. From now on, all client negotiations involving PHI go through you first. I paused, then smiled. Small, controlled, sharp. Yes, I said, they always did. When I stepped out into the hall, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Mason was gone, Halford silenced. And the contract, my contract, would be executed properly. Not because I raised my voice, not because I played politics, but because I knew the rules better than the men who tried to bend them. And this time, the rules bent back. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.